Alright guys, today I'm going to show you how to put together a set of MetalHead steel axles. Have a look at these instructions here, and there's no printed stuff that comes with the axles when you get them. So just take a look here, and this is what you'll follow. Alright, so first of all we're going to take the housing, which comes looking like this. Okay, when you get the center housing, this is what it looks like. You can see one side of it here is milled out for the rear loading. The front side is not. So the diff's going to go in here. This is the back, or the outside. If you're in the front, this will be the very front. If this is in the rear, then this would be in the very rear. And when you assemble the pinion gear onto it, you want to take the pinion gear section and put it on the opposite side from these cutouts. Okay, so the pinion gear side goes with the small slot, and the rear cover is going to go with the big slot, just so you know. So the first thing you want to do is put the pinion set on. Take the third member carrier here, and you don't need to put anything in it yet. You just need to screw it on here like this. And as you can see, there's two holes right here that go into the tube holes. Don't put any screws in there. So for now, put this on. Put the screws around the outsides of it here, and remember, these are really small little screws. All the hardware for the kit is 256 by 1/4 inch long. There's no need to crank on these. They're very strong screw, but when you put them in there, just get them nice and tight and give them maybe a 1/4 turn, and that's all you need to do. So we've assembled the third member on here. The pinion is ready to drop in, and I just threw some tubes in there so you can have a look at the assembly. Now, because these are rear loading, all you're going to do is assemble the carrier onto the center section, and then you take your pinion gear like this and you drop it in. This is a stock Axial unit, so we're just going to drop that pinion gear right in there like that. The outside bearing can go in at the end so it doesn't fall out. So there's the pinion gear ready to go. And this is an assembled stock Axial diff, and it just drops right in there like that, and you're done. There we go. Now this is a really tight fit between the bearings, the bearing and the tube. The bearing and the tube on this side, they are all very close tolerances. So when you've got it assembled, you want to turn the tube so that when the tube goes in, the little screw hole on the tube here lines up with this hole right here. It seems pretty simple stuff, but I want to tell you anyway. So you can just put it in and give it a twist, and you'll see that the tube will stop. Even if the diff is out, the tube will stop right there. It can't go in any farther because it's machined so that they mate all just in exactly the right spot. So then the other tube goes in. The cover, the rear cover, when the cover goes on, the cover will hold in the bearings. Okay, so this is all super tight tolerance stuff. If you want to seal the diff, you're going to have to use a really small amount of silicone on here, or whatever you're going to use, RTV or something like that, because the tolerance is so tight that you don't want to plug it up and bind on the bearings or anything. So we're going to take a couple of screws here, and I'm just going to run a couple of screws through here so we get this all assembled. Whoops, that's the wrong key. It's really simple, man. Drop in your screws just like this. Give that a turn here. Once you get them all lined up, then they just go right in. There we go. So we're all set to go there. And you'll see that there's absolutely no play. I'll show you what this looks like inside. You can see where the cover is holding the bearing in right there, and the front of the bearing is connected in there in the front, and there's absolutely no room for any of this stuff to move. So if you want to shim anything, put a shim on the pinion bearing. The rear carrier is not going to move. And I've tried this with different lockers and different gear sets and everything that I could find, and you should have everything work. It's going to be really, really tight, but it's going to work. So now when you put the rear tubes in, drop in the tube. This can be assembled anytime because it's all modular. So drop in the tube all the way and line up the holes so you can put that extra screw in there. And this screw that goes in here actually holds the tube right in. So if we're going to do the rear is a longer tube than the front. Okay, the front is a short tube. So let's put the rear in. We're going to take this rear straight axle from Axial here. You'll find out that when you take the straight axle, it doesn't fit in the tube. And that's because the hole in the tube is just the smallest bit too small for this little part right here. So this part right here, you'll have to file it off or grind it if you use the stock Axial. If you use 300s or something, you don't have a problem with that. So we'll drop that in there like that and get it stuck into the locker. And then we'll get the bearing and drop the bearing on the rear tube right like that. So there's the bearing on the rear tube. So now we're going to put the cover on. The rear bearing cover looks just like this. It's just a tiny little part. And you're going to drop it right on there, line up the screw holes so that you can put the little screw in at the end. And you get that to slide on there nice and straight. And it kind of pops on there, and then you can add your screw, and that's it. And the axle has absolutely no play in there. There's just maybe 5 thou worth of play in there. And you can put the screw in there to attach the thing on both sides. Now, there's the rear on this side. So let's suspect that we're going to put a front. So instead of putting the rear tubes, you can put the front tube in that does exactly the same thing. Front tube drops right in there just like that. You're going to line up the screw and put your screw in there at the back. And once the screw is in to secure the tube can't go anywhere. Like I said, the tolerance on this is really, really high. So everything is a super tight fit. And there's no way that you're ever going to break that. No way ever. There's a front. Now if we were going to use a Super 300 set, then you'd have to install the Super 300 into the knuckle first because it won't fit through the C-hub, you know that already. So there's one with a Super 300 in it. Obviously we can't fit that in because we don't have the right diff parts inside. But if you were going to put this in, then at this point you would line this all up and slide that right into the front tube just like this. And then you would put your M3 screw right in there the same way you would for the stock. Now as you can see, the tubes on these are huge. The tubes are huge. They are thick. There's lots of screw meat on there, so when you put your screw in here in the front, don't you be worried about pulling the threads out. There's lots of screw in there. Everything is a nice snug fit. These fit with all the aluminum knuckles that you can get and everything, so you should be all set to go for the fronts. And that's how you set up a MetalHead axle kit.